Hey guys, my name is Nate, and I'm the Otter Outdoorsman, and today we're going to be reviewing and comparing 4 different brands of beef jerky and figuring out which one I like the most and kind of giving you a way to compare them so you can decide which one you want to buy. Okay guys, so what we're going to be doing, as I said, is we're going to be comparing 4 different brands of beef jerky. I've chosen 4 common ones that I find in my grocery store. A very common one that I see commercials for all the time, Jack Links. For these, I'm going to be sticking with all original, whatever they call their original one, and just kind of have a good baseline. So, start with Jack Links. Another one by Jack Links, a brand called Matador. I'm adding this to it because I see it everywhere in my area. One I've seen new on the market lately, I couldn't find the actual original, so I had to go with their sea salt original. But Crave, it's kind of like we'll say it's kind of more like a gourmet beef jerky. A little bit more pricey, but I've had a few different types of theirs. And one that I see often, I didn't like when I was younger, but I figured I'd give it a try again, because I see it all the time, which is Oberto's beef jerky. So, with this, I'm going to be grading these on 5 different sections. One of which is taste. How do they taste? Do they taste good? Would I eat them again? Things like that. Texture. Texture is pretty important to me. If I'm gonna put something in my mouth, if I'm gonna put food in my mouth, I'd rather it have a good mouth feel to it. If it gets in my mouth and just bleh, then why would I want to eat it? Another point, which is the amount of connective tissue in the jerky. For those of you that don't know what connective tissue is in between the different muscles. There's forms of there's collagen is ordered in specific ways. I'm trying to think of the best way of describing it. And it's what keeps your muscles together. It's very heavily found in things like chuck meat that is filled with it, and it's what makes stews finger-licking good. That's what kind of melts out of the beef or pork and makes it soft when you stew it. It's also the stuff that you use to make gelatin. Well, regular gelatin. There's many forms of connective tissue. As I said, there's some of it is the stuff that would be used to make things like gelatin or break down to be stew. There's also connective tissue that is really tough to eat. One of which is called silver skin, and that's the stuff that no matter how much you cook it, just becomes rubber. The reason why I don't like having a lot of connective tissue, or I don't like the connective tissue being a specific way in my beef jerky, is it tends to make it a lot tougher to eat. You're more fighting with the piece of meat to get the piece off rather than, biting it and a strip comes off and then you're chewing it. With more connective tissue, you're sitting there chewing. You got a piece stuck in your teeth, and it's too much of it is just not a fun experience. The quality of the pieces. So, if it's made from inferior meat, so to speak, it's not going to taste that good. It's not going to look that good. And whatever you're going to do with it, it's not going to be as good as good beef jerky. The benefit of having quality meat is generally by the end of it, most of us want to be eating decently. And the last part I'm going to be going off on this time is going to be the amount of fat. Whereas I do like eating the fat in beef jerky sometimes, having too much fat in jerky is bad long term. So if you're trying to store it for a while, fat can go rancid a lot faster than muscle or protein. More to the fact of how it breaks down and how the fats change, but that's another story altogether. But pretty much, fat can go rancid and ruin your jerky. So if it has a high amount of fat, I'll let you know. So basically what I'll do is I'll pull a piece out, I'll show it to you, we'll observe it real quick, and then I will taste it. Okay, so first piece we're going to be looking at Jack Links. Generally my basis to go off of, because this is the one I eat the most. So we'll take a look at so connective tissue. The way you can sometimes find it is if you split it up, and it's that white stuff. So there is some connective tissue there, but I kind of expect that. But as you notice, when I tear it apart, it comes right apart. So it means it's not a huge amount. This is most likely from a decent lean cut of meat, which is good. You want to be using leaner meat to make your jerky. So you know, this is from a decent cut of meat. And it has some connective tissue, but not enough to make it tough. One of the other things is when they cut it, you can tell they're cutting it with the grain, which it makes it tougher to eat, but it keeps it together a lot better. And usually if you're cutting meat to eat yourself, you want to be cutting it against the grain, but in the case of jerky, if you cut with the grain, it's just going to fall apart, and not in a good way. Now, for the taste test. So, rip off some good pieces. So as I expect with jerky, it's nice and chewy. And I like chewiness. This does have some fat in it, but it's small flecks of it. Sometimes I found bigger pieces of fat on... sometimes I do find pieces of fat on Jack Link's jerky. But, as I said, I mean, you're going to find some fat, but you don't want, like, heaping piles of fat on it. And I have found those on occasion, but it's very rare. Generally, it tends to be small little flecks like that, which is fine. If you really want to help it preserve longer, I mean, you can scrape that off if you so choose. I'm sorry about any cuts. I'm actually filming this in my backyard, and I'm right next to a street, so and I'm filming in my backyard for just ease of filming. Texture-wise, it's good. It's generally what I expect from beef jerky, where it has a bit of chew, but at the same time, it's kind of on the smoother side. Taste-wise, it's good. I like it. It's fortunately, it's kind of my baseline, so I'm kind of biased towards it. I'm just going to finish this piece. Kind of has a slight peppery taste, a little bit of salt. Decent beefiness to it. I can't narrow down any of the flavors. It has a slight smokiness to it, but not really, which is fine. But yeah, salty, peppery, and a tiny bit smoky, but then mostly just beef. Okay, so now we have a piece from Crave. This is Crave's original sea salt. Now, it's a little bit of a darker piece.
This also looks like it was cut from a lean cut. Doesn't have a lot of fat, but kind of feels a little oily in my hand. As you can tell with this, it's just like Jack Link's. Doesn't have a lot of connective tissue on it, which is nice. It does have some, so it's a little bit harder to pull off. It has a bit more than Jack Link's, so it does make it a little bit tougher to rip apart. Quality, it seems like it's a decent quality. It seems like it hasn't been dried to the point that Jack Link's has been, so it still has a decent amount of moisture in it, which for long-term storage would be bad. So I would say it's slightly less of quality than Jack Link's, but I mean, the proof could be in the pudding. Now, let's see. So, like I said, not a lot of fat, which is nice. I mean, there's a couple specks here and there, but again, that's sometimes a little bit harder to meet. So, now we'll move on to the taste test part.
Now, like Jack Link's, I have actually had Crave before. It is a bit more on the expensive side, but I've had more of their flavored ones, which flavored-wise aren't bad. So, now this is their original with a little bit with sea salt. Okay, so you can taste a bit more of the moisture in it. The sea salt actually is not it's not over salty, so it is smooth, which from Crave I've had sometimes in the past. It's been a little bit more on the dry, chalky side, which is why I'm surprised right now. But since more on the moisture side, which might be good if you're taking this on a day hike. Falls apart in your mouth, texture-wise. It's not as chewy as Jack Link's. It's actually the more like it just falls apart really in the mouth. So it's not as jaw tiring, but you can still tell it's a single piece of meat. Where sometimes where it falls apart, sometimes that's from inferior jerkies. So I think possibly this could have been either cooked or heated longer than Jack Link's could have been, where it would have made that connective tissue we're seeing in here a little bit less holdy togethery. That's now a word. Also, it's because I think where they did when they were drying it, they did cut it along the grain to keep it together. It looks like where they cut it was they cut it against the grain just in thicker parts, so it's stuck together. Which, if that's an indication that it was a smart move. So, I like it. But as I said, I probably wouldn't bring it on longer camping trips just because of the moisture content in it. But day hikes, yeah. Also, finding stores, they have some really interesting flavors. I've had a few of their other flavors, which had good ones. But again, I'm only talking about original here. And taste-wise, I mean, it's very similar to the other one. It's a little bit more smoky. Not super smoky, so don't look when you're having it. It's not like pow barbecue smoke levels. It's kind of like it's been kissed with smoke. Probably something along the lines of using liquid smoke. This one, it has kind of a nicer salt flavor. You can kind of taste the sea salt in this, which is nice, but it's not as peppery as Jack Link's. And sweeter. It's a lot sweeter than Jack Link's was. Which may explain why it's moister, because sugar is hygroscopic, which means it holds on to moisture. So adding that salt content in there is probably what made it moister. So, I don't know. I'm not going to read the ingredients on these because I'm not a food chemist, and I couldn't explain to you what they all do. Usually those preservatives in there are for various things to keep it like this, shelf stable. So, just quickly go over it one more time, just so I make sure I had it right. Let me see. Taste, good. I liked it. It was sweet, a little bit of smoky, and a decent saltiness to it. Fell apart in the mouth, which was good. There was a little bit more connective tissue than Jack Link's, so it had a decent amount, but it wasn't enough that it didn't fall apart. Decent quality meat. Not amazing quality meat, but not bad quality meat. So it was decent quality. And some fat, but not a lot. I've been writing down notes so I can do an infographic at the end, or some sort of like just chart at the end so you can kind of compare them. And I'll also plan on posting that on my Facebook page, facebook.com/the Otter Outdoorsman. And I decided to take a quick peek at the Crave ingredients. This is probably one of the least ingredients I've seen on jerky before. That had less of what people call chemicals, but I just know them as different preservatives and various other things. Where it just says beef, cane sugar, gluten-free soy sauce, so water, soybeans, salt, alcohol. Honey contains 2% less of the following: sea salt, granulated garlic, onion powder, paprika, and spices. No nitrates and no MSG. The paprika could be where I'm getting that slight smokiness from. So if you're looking for one that commercial beef jerky that doesn't have a lot of what some people put as additives, which I know are really big to some people, not so much to me, look up Crave. I'm posting links most likely to all 4 of these typed down below.
Okay, let's move on to Matador. Now all the pieces look like this. So off the bat, that's not a good sign to me. So, take a look at connective tissue. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Has a good amount of it, but it's kind of crumbling in my hands, which to me doesn't really say it came from a good piece of meat. Even if it came from one piece of meat, I'm not sure, because literally as I was breaking it apart, it kind of it fell apart. I can't even tell if there's fat in here, just because if there is, it's kind of been really well mixed into it. Smells really smoky, but you see, but I mean, there is connective tissue in there. I can see it, but it's kind of like really mixed into it. So let's give it the taste test.
Oh, now that as I was trying to show it off, it kind of fell apart in my hand. Let's give it a test. Really smoky, like, and it's, you can tell it's liquid smoke. Yeah, this one really had liquid smoke added to it, which isn't a bad thing. It has a different taste than smoke. Kind of a more of a sharper smoke taste. Whereas the other ones were probably either like lightly smoked, or in the case of Crave, it looks like with paprika in it, probably added some smokiness to it. Taste kind of reminds me of if you ever been to a reenactment place, like up here in New England, we have Plymouth Plantation. The smokiness of it kind of reminds me of the smell of that area. It's kind of chewy, like really chewy, but it does fall apart. Other parts of the taste are getting a little peppery. This one really is salty. Texture-wise, kind of like a Slim Jim. This isn't really my favorite texture. It's not bad, but I don't think I'd eat an entire bag of this on a trip. This isn't one I'd probably bring with me. I mean, it looks like it's a good one for portioning. And maybe it would be good if you mixed it in with something. But out of so far, not my favorite. It kind of feels, out of the three I've had so far, it feels the most processed. Which, as far as jerky goes, really should just be sliced, marinated / brined, then dried. But this one has more of a texture of sausage. So I'm not sure if I'd classify it as jerky, but it's not bad. But as I said, yeah.
Okay, so now we work on our last one, which is the Oberto's jerky, which has more of kind of like this white oxidation on the outside, which is not generally what I like seeing on jerky, or at least store-bought jerky. So it doesn't look like it's a great piece of meat, but the taste will tell. So let's take a look at connective tissue. Okay, there's a decent amount, but not a whole lot, which has actually surprised me because I had Oberto's a long time ago, and back then their jerky was really tough to eat because it was extremely high in connective tissue. But it's stripping kind of easily, but it's also falling apart. So it seems like it's kind of been processed similar to how Crave was processed, where it still kind of feels like it has some moisture in it. That's a thicker piece, slightly oily, but not as bad. It feels a lot drier, which is give or take with me with jerky. Sometimes I like it on the moisture side. I kind of like how Jack Link's is pretty much. I like it. The kind of moisture content of it is kind of like Jack Link's, where it's actually dried, but it kind of tastes moist, if you get what I mean. So it looks like it's not the best cut of meat, but because it's really falling apart. But let's move on to the taste test.
Okay, so time to taste. Falling apart. Texture's kind of chalky. This is something I would need some water with. Pepperiness in it. I feel kind of the bite of the peppery on the side of my tongue. So more peppery than Jack Link's, but not as peppery as Matador. Slightly sweet, but not too much. It's a little bit easier to tear apart than Jack Link's, but taste is nothing to remember. Minus that peppery, just kick of pepper. It's like kicking me in the face with pepper. That's kind of how it is. For the amount of connective tissue in there, it's kind of falling apart, which is good. I've had pieces where they pretty much cut against the grain, and like every piece just had, like every few inches had just massive amounts of connective tissue in it in the past. That was a couple years ago. That was before I, when I was kind of testing around, when I was finding the brand I liked, but it looks like they may have stepped it up a slight. They've changed it up a bit, which I'm fine by. But very peppery. That's really my only note on the taste of it. Because that flavor is kind of overpowering anything else. And it's drier and chalky texture-wise. Didn't have a lot of fat on it. So, yeah, it's all 4. Okay, so, in conclusion, out of the 4 of them, it's a close tie for me right now. between Jack Link's original and Crave. Crave I found had a very good taste to it, and Jack Link's had the texture I liked. Jack Link's had a nice mild peppery flavor while also kind of balanced out their flavors, and this one was nice and sweet. So I'd probably put Jack Link's just slightly above Crave, but if not by a couple, just by a little bit, just because, as I said, this is something I'd probably bring on a longer trip. This is something I'd bring on a day hike. This has a good texture. This also has a much wider range of flavors. This one has some nice dependable flavors and a texture I'm more familiar with. I'd recommend, if you're trying to decide between jerkies to get, these two would be the ones to get. Third place on my thing goes to Oberto's. It had a very similar texture to Crave, but didn't have the flavors, the good balance of flavors as either of them. This one was more of just a kick of pepper. It's really all I could pull away from it. Texture was also kind of chalky and dry, so I mean, this actually probably wouldn't be bad to make pemmican out of, but it also kind of had the moisture part of it, but wasn't as pleasantly moist. It kind of just felt like chalk in my mouth. That's one that you'd really need to have a decent amount of water with. Last but not least, Matador. Yeah, it felt too processed. The bits look like it's obviously been processed. It tasted more like a dried sausage than jerky, which to me I don't classify as jerky. It's not that's not a texture I go for when I want jerky. I want something I can like sink my teeth into and and eat. This one was more of it just fell apart, and it had bold flavors, but when I'm camping, sometimes the bold flavors are not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for more of the subtler flavors. But as I said, some of the easier parts of this would be for portioning. This would be more superior for portioning. But again, very smoky, very peppery, and you can tell, as I said, bold flavor and tender bites. So go with what you want on that. So this has kind of been my analysis of these 4 different types. If there's any other brands that I missed, or brands you'd like me to check out, please let me know down below. Maybe I'll do some follow-up videos to this. I'm even thinking about doing other flavors of these brands. Maybe like do teriyaki, because that's a very common one, a very commonly flavored, very common beef jerky flavor is teriyaki, and it's actually one I do like. There's some crazy ones. And as I said, like, Crave has some really wacky flavors that, has like, what was it? One of them's like chili lime, which is spicy and it's actually pretty good. And they have some other really wacky flavors, or just mixed flavors. There's other different types of jerkies I can try out if you want me to. I'd tried turkey jerky. I've never tried it. I just never got around to it. There's salmon jerky. I could probably find other jerkies on the World Wide Web, but yeah. So let me know what you guys think. If there's any others you'd like me to check out. And my name is Nate. I'm the Otter Outdoorsman, and this has been a quick review on 4 different types of jerky. And you have a good day.